Welcome. I was so excited when Miss Donna was sharing about this opportunity, just because I've had some ties with ADHD through the years, and I was like, I would love to do it. So this is I'm really excited there's only a small crowd. It makes it more personal, and hopefully you guys will feel more comfortable asking questions in a setting like this if you'd like. And I will not have all the answers for sure, but I am going to ask you at the end if you're like, man, I was really hoping to get some tips or strategies, and she didn't even touch on that. I encourage you to leave a note, because if I don't have the answer, I would put you in contact with someone that does. So it's such a broad topic that I anticipate some of you might really be knowledgeable in one area and you're totally looking for something different than what I cover. And it's hard to know what people bring to the table. So I try to do my best to really focus on how families can support at home with ADHD. So I'll give you a little bit of background as to where some of my information and experiences come from. So I'm from Indiana. I was raised in Indiana, and this was one of my first classes, but I taught there in a public district for 9 years, and my minor was in special education. My mom was a special education teacher, and I always was just passionate about working with students with special needs. After 9 years, I had the opportunity to move to Tennessee. I was still single and looking for some adventure in my life, and I had a friend who also was a special ed teacher in Atlanta, and she said, you need to come to this school. It's amazing. It has all the things you've always wanted to do as a teacher. It's a private school, and so this was a college preparatory school for students with unique learning styles in Brentwood, Tennessee, and so this was my first crew I had there, and at this school is when I really felt like I had an opportunity to learn more about students with special needs, and we just got so much PD as staff. It was really amazing in that area, because that's what we were there to serve, that population, and so I really felt privileged to do that. So I taught there the entire 7 years. In the last few years I was the assistant division head, and then I met my husband here in Kentucky, so I moved here, and I was like, well, I've been an assistant principal. Why don't I just, try for this opportunity? And I got it. I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So I'm the principal at Cecilia Valley now. One thing I did want to tell you about that had also kind of built up my knowledge a little bit on ADHD was a crew of us. This is some of my good friends from Curry Ingram in Tennessee. We were sent to Miami, Florida for in-person training with Dr. Pelham down in Miami. And so we spent several days there, and they wanted us to bring back to our school community what they called a summer treatment program for ADHD. So it was a 8-week-long camp that we hosted. We were the first ones to ever do it. So it was a lot of pressure, but yet there was nothing to compare it to. So it was but part of the agreement is we interviewed all the families one-on-one to see if they were interested in coming. And then they had to agree to come to parent classes. We had camp every day, all day. And every Monday, the parents would come for parent education on Monday evenings. And so we would have different presenters and speakers come and talk. So that's why tonight I'm trying to give you a lot of information, but I know there's so much more out there as well. So this was actually a slide shot from that training that we had gone to, but everything that we learned in that training for the summer treatment program I think does apply just globally to ADHD. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about the ABCs of behavior, the antecedent being what happens first before the behavior and the consequence. And as you all know, consequences can be positive or negative. It doesn't always have to be a negative consequence. So I might come back and touch on this a little bit, but it was a very structured system where kids could learn about behaviors, and we could teach them self-awareness skills there. I also have a niece in Florida named Audrey. She's in 7th grade, and she has dyslexia and ADHD. And so some of my reference points and experiences come from her. And then I have a son. And for the longest time, this is my 21st year teaching, but people would always say, well, you'll understand when you have kids, and I was like, kind of annoyed me that people said that. Like, I still work hard, I still, I don't understand, but I do have a son now, he's 3. So I'm just learning behavior, you know, as a parent. It's a totally different ball game as a parent than it is as a teacher. So some of the strategies work and some of them don't work, and so it's very humbling every single day. So you'll probably hear me talk about him a lot. But as I was doing some of just, you know, going through my slides, I came across this trailer I was going to show you. It's a documentary about ADHD, so I thought I would just play it. I'd never seen it until I was kind of preparing for this. So I haven't watched the movie, so I haven't even looked at the ratings, but.
We knew fairly soon after he was born that there was something totally challenging about him.
ADHD diagnoses in the United States for school kids has increased by 43% in less than 10 years.
This was the first time a teacher ever mentioned ADHD. I was super offended.
A big part of me thought it was a bogus diagnosis.
I'm yelling at him and I'm like, Reese, what is wrong with you? And he'll come back with something like, everything, Dad. And then I immediately feel awful.
Teachers were like, you need to focus better because of my hyperactivity.
I didn't understand. Why doesn't this picture become clear to me?
Is she not trying hard enough? Is she not applying herself?
Imagine somebody sitting on the keys of the computer. That's ADHD.
As a parent, the thing that bothers me the most are the friend issues.
I was just a quirky, out-of-control kid with very few friends.
He wanted the medicine, and he was the one that said, I think if I have it, my friends and my teachers will like me better.
They wanted Bear to be expelled from school, which means he missed graduating.
I got suspended from school.
I got a call from a police officer. Person at the juvenile detention center says he'll be here all weekend.
Just unbelievable.
The flip side of distractibility is curiosity. What's that? What's that? What's that? If you didn't care, you wouldn't get distracted.
I'm a risk taker, I'm creative.
Processing all of these screens in front of me, the more intense it gets, the better I am.
Zara's a brilliant writer.
He has a lot of skills, like to ask questions, to be argumentative, to push boundaries.
Around ADHD, there's tremendous ignorance. Most people are not aware of the positives that go with it.
It just grinds you down into thinking you're stupid.
Can't sit still, disorganized, can't focus, lazy, stupid.
You can't make it. You never listen, you don't clean your room.
And a space cadet.
It's a super skill set. And what people think.
You know, sometimes as I was looking for some clips too to highlight some topics, so you just didn't have to hear me talking, some of the videos are just really informative but really boring. So I watched that, I was like, oh, that kind of makes me excited to go to the movies, you know, and want to see it. So tonight I want to briefly just kind of talk about what ADHD is, some of the symptoms, causes, and a little bit about the diagnosis and treatment options. But what I hope to spend the majority of the time on is just talking about executive function and strategies for home. So according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, ADHD is one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorders in childhood. It's usually first diagnosed in childhood and then lasts into adulthood. So often, you know, students struggle with paying attention, controlling impulsive behaviors, or being overly active. If you look up, you know, there's going to be lots of other definitions that are similar. And even though ADHD is not considered a learning difference, about 30 to 50% of all children with ADHD also have co-occurring challenges. Like I was sharing, my niece also has dyslexia, depression, anxiety. There's other pieces as well that go along with that. The DSM-5 is redone about every 10 years. It's kind of the medical definition guru book. So essentially, you guys I'm sure you've heard a lot of stuff that says ADD, ADHD, which one is it, and all of that. But currently, based on the DSM-5, there's only ADHD. There's no longer technically the ADD term, but there's 3 presentations. So you have your predominantly inattentive ADHD, your predominantly hyperactive impulsive presentation, and then the third is the combination of both. So this is probably similar to some checklists, but some of the symptoms, I'll just give you a second, not read them to you, but some of these are the symptoms from the DSM-5 for both inattentive and then hyperactive. And anyone that wants if you want this keynote at the end, you can just send me your email and I can send it to you so you don't have to. But I will not. I will not play videos the entire night, but I did like this. It is about 7 minutes, so it's a little bit longer, but I think it's a really good overview of some of the things of the background before we get into some of the strategies. So.
Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, known more commonly as ADHD, is a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by persistent inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. The signs and symptoms are the result of executive dysfunction, meaning a disruption in the way the brain is able to regulate and control thought processes. Based on these signs and symptoms, there are 3 main subtypes of ADHD, which are predominantly inattentive, with features of a lack of attention, as the name suggests, predominantly hyperactive impulsive, where there is an excess of activity and acting on impulses, and combined type, where features of both are present. This is the most common case, seen in around 62% of patients. Inattentive examples could be often overlooking details or making careless mistakes, difficulty maintaining focus on tasks or during conversation, even when there's no obvious distraction. Others are failing to follow instructions, complete tasks, organize tasks, losing items, and forgetfulness. Females tend to display more symptoms of inattention and distractibility than hyperactivity and impulsivity. The hyperactive impulsive features include trouble sitting still, fidgeting, talking constantly, including interrupting others, or even being unable to wait turns, such as in a line. As patients get older, the symptoms become less evident. Poor handwriting and dyslexia have also been found to be more prevalent in patients with ADHD. Additionally, emotional dysregulation is considered to be a core feature, which is an emotional response that does not fit within traditionally accepted emotional responses. This could be tantrums or angry outbursts, crying in situations that don't affect other people, or becoming easily stressed and frustrated with seemingly trivial tasks. However, it is difficult to define the point at which normal responses end and abnormal ones begin. In 2 out of 3 cases, children with ADHD will also have other psychiatric disorders, including anxiety and depression, sleep disorders, autism spectrum disorder, or learning disabilities. ADHD persists to adulthood in 30 to 50% of cases. As a result, there can be social consequences, such as difficulty in completing school and holding down a job. There is a higher prevalence of substance abuse disorders in ADHD patients and an increased risk of suicide across all age groups. ADHD patients are also overrepresented in prison, with some studies suggesting a 25% incidence. The mechanism behind ADHD is not fully understood, although it is thought to be the result of changes in production or the use of dopamine and noradrenaline, which act as neurotransmitters in the nervous system. Specifically, the mesolimbic dopamine pathway and locus coeruleus noradrenergic system are involved in executive functions and stress responses, and these are thought to be fundamental in the pathogenesis of ADHD. Research has also found that the anterior cingulate gyrus and dorsolateral prefrontal cortex are smaller in ADHD patients, which could explain the deficits in goal-directed behavior. Genetics are thought to play a role in the causes, with a 74% heritability, which roughly is how much someone's genes affects differences in their traits. Siblings of children diagnosed with ADHD are 3 to 4 times more likely to also suffer the condition. The environment also has a significant impact, including multiple related to pregnancy and birth. This could be exposure to alcohol, smoking, or insecticides as a fetus. Low birth weight and premature births are also risk factors, as are infections up to early childhood, such as rubella or varicella zoster virus. Some studies quote 30% of children with traumatic brain injuries later develop ADHD. Overall, it is a clinical diagnosis with no specific laboratory or imaging tests, so history is the basis of the diagnosis. The DSM-5 criteria for ADHD are divided into the subtypes. There are 9 long-term symptoms of inattention or hyperactivity impulsivity, and of these 9, 6 must be present in children, while 5 are needed in teenagers or adults. These symptoms need to also have been present between the ages of 6 and 12 years, and need to affect more than one environment. These symptoms must also produce social, school, or work-related impairment. The management includes the use of medication and therapy. Behavioral therapies are first line in mild symptoms or patients that are school-aged, which could include cognitive behavioral therapy and psychoeducation. Interpersonal therapy and family therapy are other options. The mainstay of medication are stimulants, like amphetamines or methylphenidate, which are dopamine and noradrenaline reuptake inhibitors, which coincides with the suspected pathophysiology. Amphetamines have the additional effect of increasing the release of dopamine. 70% of patients respond to these medications, but some side effects to be aware of include insomnia, increased blood pressure, and a decreased appetite. Non-stimulant medications include antidepressants and alpha-adrenergic agonists. Atomoxetine is a noradrenaline reuptake inhibitor and is particularly commonly used, and bupropion is another option. Guanfacine and clonidine are alpha-adrenergic agonists, which are other options, particularly in children and adolescents. Exercise has also been found to be beneficial as an add-on therapy.
Okay, so just a little bit of an overview there. So they've talked about the causes in the video, the diagnosis process, and then the different treatments. So today we'll kind of talk about the behavior aspect of ADHD. How many of you have heard of executive function? Okay. I'm going to play this one too, real short, and I promise it's the last video for a little bit, but I think she does a good job of explaining executive function.
You can build one and click it.
Hello, brains. I was going to start this episode with me juggling a bunch of different tasks to demonstrate a situation that required way too much executive function. But I realized getting all the props for that and figuring out how to act it out and film it properly required way too much executive function. Did I use that term right? What is executive function? According to our How to ADHD dictionary, executive function, noun, is a set of cognitive processes that help us self-regulate so we can effectively plan, prioritize, and sustain effort toward our goals. Executive function is kind of like the CEO of the brain. It helps us go from wanting to do a thing to actually getting it done. And there's a lot that goes into that. The cognitive processes that make up executive function are things like response inhibition, which helps us not be impulsive, working memory, which helps us hold information in our head temporarily or remember it while we work with it, set shifting, which is what helps us shift between tasks that have different cognitive demands, and the ability to delay immediate gratification so we can achieve long-term rewards. In ADHD, the research term for this is delay aversion. These functions help us with what people often call being an adult, which makes sense because executive function is located in the last part of the brain to develop and doesn't fully develop until around the age of 25. In ADHD brains, it takes even longer. According to ADHD researcher Dr. Russell Barkley, executive function in ADHD is up to 30% delayed, which is why those with ADHD can seem immature. And even once it does fully develop, it's still impaired. So some of the things parents do to support their kids' executive function: make sticker charts, lists, put away distractions, create routines. They might have to do more of, or for longer, for their ADHD kids. And as adults, we often need to do this for ourselves. This is so critical for those of us with executive function challenges that Dr. Barkley compares it to building a ramp for someone in a wheelchair. It's a necessary accommodation if we want to get to where we're trying to go. Not everyone with ADHD has impairments with all of the cognitive processes involved in executive function. For example, one brain's working memory might be just fine, but everyone with ADHD does have impairment in executive function overall. Often it's not that we don't know what to do, it's that we don't have the executive function to effectively do it. So if you or someone you love is having a hard time getting things done, you might ask, is this actually about effort, or is this an executive function issue? When trying to create an ADHD-friendly environment, you might consider what would make things easier on executive function. If there are behaviors you want to discourage, you might ask, what would require more executive function? How can I make doing this thing harder? And if you're having a bad brain day because you didn't sleep well last night, you could say, my executive function isn't doing great right now. Maybe I need to skip the complicated intro. Because, as my good friend Eric Tivers puts it, we can do hard things, but we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. You can check out some of our videos on ways to support executive function here, and we're going to be going deeper into different executive functions in future videos. Thank you to my brain advocates and all my Patreon brains for supporting content like this. Because of your support, I've been able to expand my very neurodiverse team, which is making it easier on all of our executive function. Like, subscribe, click all the things, and I will see you next video. Bye, brains!
So, what I wanted to do is kind of use the rest of our time together to talk about some of the executive function behaviors. So I've just made kind of 8 headers. If you want to take notes, you can. You don't have to. But I thought I would just share. This is where I plan to just share a couple strategies of things for home. Welcome. And then also something that I learned at Curry Ingram Academy was how much games can be a really big tool in supporting executive function. And so most of your children probably go to schools where they have a special time of day where it's the what I need time, where they kind of just focus on what they need. So at the school I came from, some of our kids needed more help in math, some needed more help in reading, and some needed more help with executive function. So they actually had an executive function group that would meet, and they would play games that would challenge different parts of the brain. So I just will tie in, mention some games as well. So we'll start with impulse control. So obviously that's pretty self-explanatory. That's going to be not, like with all the presentations, it's going to be more so with the impulsive and hyperactive profile. But one thing that is, I think, can be very powerful is reviewing social stories, discussing scenarios, and role play. So kind of talking about things that would be faux pas in social situations. So, some of your kids, some kids, like they were saying, if they're maybe on the autism spectrum disorder, you use something like social stories. So this was a real social story from a kid that we worked with. This kid happened to also have autism, was on the autism spectrum, and also had ADHD. And some of social stories you might read and think, I don't think my student would respond well to a social story. So this kiddo, after we collected data, saw that his biggest emotions were frustration, anger, and he was bored. Those were the things. So it would kind of review, validating, these are the things that I feel. And then it says, when I feel frustrated, mad, or bored, I want to be silly, throw things, distract my classmates, or run away. So just kind of rephrasing for them. But if I act that way, I'll have to do my work at home instead of playing. I cannot stay in class and earn my money. My classmates may not want to be my friend, and that would make me sad. When I'm frustrated, mad, or bored, I can ask for help. I can ask for a different assignment, or I could ask to help my teacher. When I use my words and take a brain break, my teachers can help me solve the problem. my classmates feel safe and happy, and then I help curriculum run smoothly. That's my job as a student. So kind of just reminding them, we know you have these struggles, you know you have these struggles, but coaching them in advance. And if you don't want it to be that formal where it feels as, not cheesy, but if it's not as, so scripted, I think just having the conversation with the kiddos, anytime you know that the routine's out of whack is sometimes when they struggle, when they do lose that routine. Just saying, today is club day. I know your schedule will be different. You won't get to go to PE today. I know you hate when you don't get to go to PE. I'm sure you're going to feel frustrated, and kind of talking through with them some things so that they can anticipate and have a game plan before it happens, because it's sometimes in the moment that they have a hard time coming up with the plan B if they've not already thought about it and planned it out. So, and then role play can be powerful as well. So here's another sample of a social story with too much energy. Another strategy is just positive self-talk. So I actually, this is interesting, I have a kind of a personal connection, but I'll be open and honest with y'all. So in my early 20s, I was out of nowhere just started having panic attacks. And no one in my life had ever talked about panic attacks, anxiety, like that wasn't really a word that we talked about or used or anything. And so I actually was like, they were occurring unexpectedly out of nowhere. I didn't know what they were because no one had ever talked about them. And so I called my mom and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And they would happen when I was driving or just these unexpected times. And I said, I need some medicine or something. I don't know what I need, but I can't, this is like impacting my life really drastically. And so she connected me with a psychologist that I started seeing and talking about, and we did some of that cognitive behavioral therapy where she kind of walked me through my thoughts. And it was amazing how negative, and I didn't even know it. Like she would talk me through different scenarios. It was amazing how many of my thoughts or things that I was saying to myself were so negative and were having such a bad impact. So I sometimes think that I experienced that for a reason, because now I feel like I do connect with people when they talk about anxiety. I can actually say like, yes, I understand that feeling of like you're having a heart attack, or it's physically making you sick, or you're avoiding doing something because you don't want to feel that way. But we all have self-talk, and we all have positive and negative self-talk, but the impact that it makes can be really huge. So I think having positive self-talk, preparing your kids, even when we were talking about that role playing, that preparing them for difficult situations. So instead of I feel, when I feel frustrated or I'm disappointed, giving them kind of more positive thoughts that they can say. Another thing is exercise is huge. And I talked to you guys about my niece. So she is involved in a lot. I know medication is a very personal decision for children, and my sister-in-law and brother have chosen not to medicate, but they do other proactive things, and exercise is one of them. So she's involved in, swimming has been a really good high-impact sport for her, and lacrosse, and then she struggles with the dyslexia, so they do her normal school day, and then they have done consistent tutoring in the evenings for years now, because she's always going to have the dyslexia, profile, but she's found some strategies to work through it. So one game is called Freeze. It's literally just the freeze game, and so this can be a good one with impulsivity, just because it causes kiddos to stop and think, and it's a fun way to practice as far as games. Another game that can help is with impulse control is Jenga. You have to have the self-monitoring, the flexible thinking, and the impulse control, and you all have played it, so you can understand that. And then also recommended when I was researching on some ADHD websites is No Stress Chess, which I have not yet played, but that might be another good one for ages 7 and up that helps. And a lot of these games do help more than one area of the executive functioning, like this one, multiple areas. So the next one is emotional control. And so the first thing I think, and this is where I've had such, as a parent, this is like I've really had some aha moments where I catch myself, I'm like, is this you talking? Like you sound like, the grumpiest grumperson ever. Like I just catch myself. And so just really being thoughtful about when I talk, what I'm saying when I talk, and the commands that I'm giving. So my old principal, Dr. Hanna, would talk a lot about precision commands, being very precise. So, you know, if you're cooking and your child's in the other room, it's not probably going to benefit them if they struggle with emotional control to yell from the other side of the house. So making sure that you have their attention, giving one command at a time, and then if they haven't followed it, giving them a reminder to follow it, and then if they're not following it, to give a consequence if not followed. So I don't know, I'm learning, like I said, every day, and I'm definitely not perfect, but I was also reading as a parent 1, 2, 3 Magic, which is an older book, but I have been using that, and I've had some success with that with my toddler, and because there's so many things you want them to do. So it's time to go brush our teeth. I don't want to. Okay, you know, I'll meet you in the bathroom, and then I'll just start counting, and if he doesn't get there by 3, then we go to timeout. I'm not angry with him. It's not a big thing. We're going to go to timeout. And so that's been something I've been trying. 9 out of 10 times if I start counting, I try not to do it. Some days I don't have to do it at all. And if you do it with every task, obviously it's not going to work. When we did the ADHD summer treatment program and we had that camp and we did timeout in that setting, the way that they trained us to do timeout is not to start the timer until they're quiet and they're calm. So often if I say, you know, and Hank's a toddler, but timeout, I mean, we had 10-year-olds in timeout. Timeout really isn't a baby thing. It can be a big kid thing as well. We wouldn't start the timeout until, like I said, they were calm and quiet. And then when they get out, it's kind of more that therapeutic time where you say, you don't have to have a big lecture, you don't have to have a big talk, but this is why you were in timeout, you know, and coaching them for the next time that it happens, what they could do differently. So we talked a lot about only giving commands when needed, being positive, redirecting, using humor, trying to keep it simple, and then having a choice. Sometimes I find that to be helpful. I know that they don't want to do either thing, but if I say, would you rather have chicken or hamburger, then they can choose that. And then sometimes when they don't choose, I say, okay, then I'll choose for you. You know, I'm sure you all have done that as well. And then the proximity control sometimes is enough, so you don't have to say anything. If you have company and they're doing something that is really not polite and you just want to come up, but you don't want to, you know, harp on them in front of the company, sometimes coming. And then also I read something about not putting the kid in timeout, but if they're using a material or toy the wrong way, putting the toy or the material in timeout, you know, and having kind of a reverse role there. Another strategy for the emotional control is mindfulness. There's tons of good resources out there and online videos and things for mindfulness. Progressive muscle relaxation is actually, when I was seeing a psychologist for my struggles with anxiety, she did this with me. So when we had our sessions, she had me close my eyes, the lights were low, she had some calm music on. She did the talking, but actually found some of these online. And for those of you that haven't heard it, you go kind of through the whole body and you tense different parts of the body, and then you relax them and you really feel what it feels like for them to be relaxed, and kind of that body awareness piece. And so that was pretty cool. Naming and taming emotions. I think some of the training I've had just talks about, I think sometimes when kids are raised, they're raised that happy emotions are good emotions and then angry emotions are bad emotions. And so taking away the labels for emotions for kids and just, it's okay to have all kinds of emotions, and talking about that. How are you feeling today? Oh, you had a bad day. You know, what was bad about it? And not making them feel like you don't really want to hear about it because they were angry, or if they're angry, letting them talk it through. Because if you can name it, you can tame it. But sometimes kids, if they feel shamed by the negative, what we call negative emotions or undesired emotions, it's hard to coach them on how to work through it if that dialogue isn't open. And then reviewing the self-talk statements we were talking about. And then sometimes kids don't need a time out. You know, I've been using it kind of in that book when my son's name is Hank. If he's not following the direction I've given, and I've given him a warning, then we're doing it as kind of a non-compliance, like this is what I'm asking you to do. But sometimes my husband and I know, like, if he's wild and running around and we've been having a big wrestle time and we're acting silly, and then we ask him to do something, he's not really regulated at that time. And so he's not in his, what I've heard called the choosing mind. So trying to be careful about not asking your kids to do things when you know they're not in a place to make a good decision. Maybe just giving them a break to cool down before going to that, back to that command or that task. Planning and prioritizing, I think, is one, and the one that you guys as parents may see the biggest impact with school and struggling with schoolwork, especially as kiddos get older. And I know it seems silly, like, yeah, we all have an agenda, we all know it, but I think it's having the tools and then trying to find tools that you can use consistently. So for planning and prioritizing, you know, using whatever, you know, sometimes schools provide the agenda or families can provide an agenda where they can write down their homework assignments or big projects coming up, and then establishing routines at home. So trying not to do things, because you know our brain has so much working space to manipulate things and do activities, but if things are always changing, we're always trying to figure out the change, and so so much of the brain is used on that, they can't focus on the activity, and it makes some of these activities much harder. So, you know, just trying to stick to some sort of a routine can be really helpful, extra helpful for kiddos with ADHD. I really liked this. I think I need this at work, 125%. It's kind of a cool twist on like the to-do list, or you could even do like your to-do list on Post-it notes and then categorize them. But this is called the Eisenhower Matrix, and it comes from President Eisenhower years ago. And it is basically something that you can do to try to sort tasks, actions, and incidents. So if something is, sometimes I just make one big list, but my first item and my third item can be done in 20 seconds. And my second item is like a 3-hour project. And so I'm like, every day I'm just rewriting it. I'm like, this is making me feel so anxious, like I'm never accomplishing anything. So really, if you can help your kid think about, you know, the week ahead or the day ahead or the weekend and the tasks, kind of sorting them. And then once you have them sorted on, it's urgent and important. It's important but not urgent. It's not urgent or important, and urgent but not important. So like this might be some of your things that can be eliminated, and some of these can't be eliminated because they're all part of life, but helping model for your kiddos prioritizing what is the most important and the best use of their time to help them get wins. To-do lists are great, obviously. That's kind of that big picture, your calendar. But then within your calendar, you know, every day that I get to work in the morning, I have a notebook that I just keep a running notebook. I used to try to have like a binder for, this was for parent conversations and this was for behavior, and it was like, I can't keep up with this. And as adults, I mean, these same strategies for kids with ADHD are good for everyone. It's not just for them. It's, you know, it's good for everyone. But I finally one of my friends said, well, I just keep a notebook. I don't really have a notebook for everything. I just have it and I date it and then I know it's there. So every day I get to work, I just turn to the next blank page, I put the date, and I make my daily priorities or to-dos. And then I think the biggest thing that can make kids feel overwhelmed when they struggle with planning and prioritizing is projects and all the steps that go into a project. So really, what we think is something simple might be overwhelming to them. So trying to make a flow chart of the project. So if they have to do, you know, a mobile about a book, you know, you can break down the materials that you're going to need, the steps you're going to have to do as a reader, you know, if you're going to, how many nights it's going to take. And then also something I really like is doing what they call reverse planning. So if I've seen this before in a calendar too. So if today is Tuesday, March, what is today? 13th? 14th. So looking forward and just saying, okay, like literally looking at the whole month and going backwards. This is the day it's due. So if I know this is due, I know the night before we don't want to plan to go out to dinner with friends because we know we're going to be, finalizing that project or whatever, and kind of working backwards. So you can kind of teaching them how to work backwards, and then taking whatever you guesstimate how long something will take and multiplying it by 2, because usually that's what happens is you run out of time and then you feel rushed, or the kid feels rushed, and it's just the perpetual, I'm always rushed, I'm never on time, I can't catch up, that feeling of just how we feel as adults, So, and then game-wise, for planning and prioritizing, Scrabble is a great one. And this is a game called Animal Logic for ages 5 and up. And then Quiddler is for 8 and up, and it's not the hardest words, but it's another word game that you could play. Okay, the next executive functioning behavior category is flexibility. So one strategy for that is, you guys have heard the choose your own adventure stories, where you can kind of see, kids can see, they can read, and then there's a point in which they get to make a decision about which path they take to finish the story. So reading stories like that, that's just a sample from Amazon. Or not buying anything, but just taking books that you already have and asking your kiddos to come up with a different ending in their story. So we do story before bedtime in the bed, we're telling a story, and every time I try to start telling it, he tries to tell me like who he wants in the story. I'm like, are you telling the story or am I telling the story? But it's always, usually the setting is the splash pad or the trampoline park, but it's like making it a different plot every time. Like, can we do something different this time than the? Also, another one is really good is visualizing and discussing jokes, riddles, puns, and multiple meaning words and number puzzles could be really good for helping kiddos with flexibility. So this is just an example of a pun. And then as your kids get older and they have different kinds of tests, trying to help them teach, when you see this kind of test, this is how you approach it. When you see this type of test, this is how you approach it. So if it's a spelling test, that's one way to study, is practicing, reading the words, or even if you don't have the exact words, practicing with words with that pattern. If you have an open-ended test where they want them to have a written response, they might need to use one of their writing strategies like race or something else that they've learned at school to pull content out of the material. Another one that can be fun for flexibility is Pictionary. It's kind of an old school one. And then there's a game called Max that's supposed to be good. I don't have this game. This is one I've not played, for ages 4 to 7. That's supposed to be good for emotional control, planning, and prioritizing. And then there's a game called Mind Trap for 12 and up, so that would be for your older learners. And that could be a good one for thinking critically. Okay, the next area we're going to talk about is working memory. So working memory, I think about when I try to explain working memory to teachers, or if there's someone who's struggling with, let's just say, for example, they're like, well, I told them they could write anything they wanted to write about, and they couldn't think of anything. And I'm like, whoa, well, that's kind of a big task for a kid who's struggling with a lot of things, because your working memory is your ability to hold and manipulate information. So if you have a kid who is maybe very creative, but if they're still struggling with handwriting and spelling isn't their strong suit, and even though they might speak grammatically correct, getting it in sentence form isn't easy, and then organizing their ideas, it's hard to even know which part of it really is that they're struggling with. So some of the strategies for working memory is mnemonics. And I don't know about you all, but when I think of mnemonics, I think of kind of the standard one where it's like that one has a hyperlink. I wanted to. This was kind of a cool article, and it talked about the 9 types. So they were saying like a keyword. For example, if you're trying to learn the Spanish word for cat, which is gato, then think of a gate and then imagine the cat sitting on top of the gate. So I don't think of that. When I think of mnemonic, I think of the word and each letter and the word stands for something, but apparently that's just one of 9 types of mnemonics. So another one is like this. When I think about being a kid, I think my mom's teacher brain would teach me those tricks. Like if I was taking a standardized test, she would have me think of things for memory to picture or visualize. And then chunking. So when you guys think about why our phone numbers and those chunks of numbers, that's to help us with our working memory. Or some of our kids, when they go to the cafeteria, have to type in their lunch numbers or different things. If you can help your kids learn things in chunks, that's a good mnemonic strategy. Musical mnemonics is something like if you have the ABC song, but then you plug in new words for that song, they already know that rhythm, and so it kind of helps them with memory. And then this is more what I think of when I think of a mnemonic is like a word where each letter stands for another word, like TGIF. Rhyming, so like hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle. And then making connections. This is, I don't know, this is like really high tech mnemonic. A visual one that is probably pretty cool. And then they said peg and then using stories and images. So those can be all good strategies. But in school a lot, the ones that we use as teachers typically are the visual word mnemonics when you're helping them retain information. You know, we learn the planets a certain way, or you learn how to do the steps of long division with different mnemonics. And with Google now, I mean, if you pretty much have a question or you want to know, you can find it. You know, you can find a lot of cool tips out there. I think I always say it wrong, so I get embarrassed saying it. Sudoku is a good one. Distraction is a good game for working memory for ages 8 and up. And then self-monitoring is another one. So one strategy for the self-monitoring piece is just kind of taking workspaces and adapting them to help them be somewhere that a kiddo likes to go. So trying to make it quiet, peaceful music. When I'm working, I can't listen to music with words, but I like to have music on in the background. So I'd find different things that sound nice. And then a visual timer can be good just because if you just tell them a time, it can feel kind of abstract. But this is an example of a visual timer where they can see how long they have to work. And then a lot of you know, like on your phone, there's different tools, or iPads, there's different tools for speech to text. So when I talked about the working memory being hard, when I was at Curry Ingram, the last school for writing, I have kids with great ideas. I would still have them do the planner, but because writing and spelling were so difficult for them, after we did the planning by hand, they could do the speech to text in their iPad. Not every kid, if it was in their learning plan, they could use that, or you could for fun or whatever. And then they didn't have to stress about the writing. They could just enjoy the storytelling or writing the passage through their words. But then they can even go back and monitor their writing, because it's still their idea that they've composed, by reversing that. And there's a feature of text to speech where then it reads it back to you so they can hear. Did that make sense? Did what I say just make sense? Because sometimes they don't know as they're saying it if it made sense or not. And then talking through, this kind of goes back to that role play a little bit that we talked about earlier. We know that everyone faces problems, but giving them plans that they can have so when they encounter a problem. So if they can skip a problem, if they can ask a friend, if they can reread, giving them. And then this is a strategy called START behaviors. This was another thing that my old principal was really big on, but it's basically, instead of telling them what not to do, it's telling them what you want them to do. So that's what I catch myself doing when I'm like, oh, I have to stop. And it would just be like, tell them what you want them to do, not what you don't want them to do. Otherwise, it just kind of turns into the nagging. So when you do a START behavior, you start off by picking 2 to 3 behaviors. Typically, if you're looking at changing behavior, even if they might have more than that they're struggling with, you want to pick the ones that are the biggest priority to you. State them in a positive way, And then when they demonstrate it, you give them some sort of praise or attention, and then you work to make it immediate, frequent, and positive. So right now, we had a phase where Hank wouldn't sleep in his bed, so we just encouraged him, and I found this thing on Amazon called a star jar, and because I'm not going to buy him something every time he brushes his teeth, but I do want to give him positive reinforcement. And I think older kids, just anytime you can give them something concrete, it can be good. So when he has a night where he sleeps in his bed all night, he puts a star in this jar. When the jar is full, we either have like an experience reward, like making a fort, or if we got a free something from a Happy Meal or something, that's what he earns. So we'll put what he could earn either on his dresser, or we'll talk about it until he gets that jar full. Right now we're doing it for sleeping in your bed and potty training. Those are the two things that we're working on. But it might be like he's done the thing where he's been whining a lot lately, and we're like, don't use your whiny voice. We don't want to hear, use your big boy voice. So if he has a dinner where he uses his manner, you could pick whatever it is that you're really wanting to hone in on. I think the key is just not having too many choices. And then behavior charts. So this is one that's kind of hard to see, but if you had your 2 or 3 behaviors, and then for the week, you could have a goal of how many overall stickers you could get in order to earn something. This is a sample of one that from the school I worked at before, Cecilia Valley, but the kiddos' behaviors that we were focusing on were speaking, and I named my Hank after this Hank, so because he was just a sweetheart, but he was speaking respectful to all students, speaking respectful to adults, and then using materials the right way. So what we did is we broke up the day into chunks, and then this one's a pretty complex one. You can go much more simple, and you wouldn't use this obviously for home, but you could adapt. You get the idea of it. So for every part of the day, we kind of had a rubric. So if it was perfect, that kiddo could get a 5 for that part of the day, and then obviously all the way down to 0 if the behavior wasn't strong. But what we're trying to teach them to do is that you don't have one bad choice and then the whole day is a bad day. You can have a bad choice and then you get a fresh start. And then we took his points and we said, if you got every single point, if you had 5s for everything all day, that would be your very highest reward. And then you'd have your medium rewards and then your lowest. But because we were trying to almost build up his self-esteem and what his peers thought about him, even if he was in the lowest category, he could still earn something. We had, actually it's not on this one, we had another kid where they could earn something for a friend. So they didn't really get in trouble, but they would earn something for a friend. So that way their friends were like, oh, thank you for getting me, this chair. Now the kid didn't have a great day, but his friends still saw him kind of in a positive light because he contributed to him getting something. And so we used this, and then we kept these over time, and it helped us. And then with one behavior seemed to be good, he was getting mostly 5s, that's when you can take that behavior out and focus on a new behavior. So, and a lot of kids, I know you hear the word behavior a lot, but there can be positive and negative behaviors. And there's a lot of kids with ADHD that don't have bad behavior. They might just struggle with attention. So then the behaviors might be, focusing on work or, working without taking breaks or those type of things. And then for all of us, we know that task initiation can be overwhelming, just starting on something or thinking of all the things you have to do. So this is just a strategy. I actually saw someone else do this once at a park. I was at a park, and this maybe a year and a half ago or something, and this mom came up and she was like, all right, honey, are you ready? 5. And she literally was like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and blast off. And the kid literally just jumped in her arms. And I was like, oh my gosh, how did you train your kid to do that? But I think it was probably their cue. It was kind of when I was counting more punitively, you better get over here and do this because I asked you to do something. But that was their transition. That must have been their transition cue. I learned this strategy too. Sometimes just getting started is the hardest part. So I had gone to a PD once, and Dr. Calloway shared the strategy called 2-7-22. And basically you sit down and you set a timer. You can either start it for 2 minutes. If you can work for 2 and you're feeling good, set it for 7 more. If that goes well, you can go to 22. And you might only do 2, and that's fine, but it just allows you kind of those small wins. And then we talk about this a lot with teachers, and you know, some of the best practice with teaching is not just telling kids what you want them to do, but doing it together. So that it's the I do, we do, you do model, where you're gradually releasing responsibility. So starting off modeling steps, and then the we do is kind of that co-regulation, helping the kiddo, and then the you do, making sure that they can try it independently, because you don't want to do everything for them, and you don't want to always just tell them what to do and not help them. Because a lot of times, I loved that one snippet I showed you, the one video where they talked about it's not really a matter of them having the skills, because there's a million times you're like, I know they know this multiplication fact. Why can't they just do this multiplication fact? Or I know they can do certain things. Sometimes it's just other things that are going on and keeping them from focusing. And then this is one I hear teachers do a lot in classrooms is, you know, they might do the lesson, have the kids talking about a topic, and they'll talk about, okay, we're getting ready to break into stations. And, you know, at this station, remember, we're not going to use the flashlight to hit our friends. We're going to use it to flash the light, you know, and kind of going through really supporting them to make good choices by coaching them. But then also saying, can anyone, you know, tell your friends after you play with the manipulatives, what are you going to do on your worksheet, to see if the kid can repeat the directions back. So I kind of connect this with that precision command, like when you get your kids' attention and you're asking them to do something, seeing if they can repeat it. And then using if-then contingencies, using small tasks as a reward, like getting a drink of water. So I had listened to this lady who was talking about trauma and working with students that had had trauma, and how they really some students that have experienced trauma really struggle with no's based on the topic that they're struggling with. So if you had a kid who was, you know, didn't get all the food when they were always hungry and they always had to fight for food, or, you know, they knew that, she had adopted them, and this might be 9 years later, but if they said, can I have a snack? And she said no, they might have a level 10 meltdown because she had said no. So she had kind of shared the strategy of if-then as well. So like she would take something she wants them to do, so you can have a snack if, you know, you do this first. So it's kind of a win-win. They're getting something they want and you're getting something they want. So if the kid says, can I have a snack? If you have an orange, you can have a snack, or if you get your bedroom cleaned up, then you can have a snack. But giving you a little bit of, giving you yeses, but you have a little bit more control of how they get what they want, instead of just giving in because you're like exhausted of the reaction if they don't get it. And then organization. I don't know about you all, but I'm someone that I always have good intentions, and I thrive. Like when I newly organize something, it feels amazing, and you walk in and you're like, this feels so good, and then, you know, a month later you're like, oh, why is it back to how it was? So and I don't know if any of you watched the what is it on Netflix, the home edit. That's a really good binge if you need a if you need a good one that's like, it's one of those before and afters that's so fun. But just naming spaces for things for your kiddos. So in the bedroom, making sure kids know where things go, having spots, having it labeled. And then for a homework space, you know, making sure everyone doesn't have a space in their home, a desk necessarily, but you can have a cart that has the materials that can go to the quiet, because every night there might be a different space in the home that's quiet. You know, maybe it's the kitchen sometimes or the bathroom sometimes, but if you can get the materials for them so there's no excuses that they don't have what they need. And sometimes, you know, after, and I did this, you know, when I organized my laundry room, I was so excited, and I sent my mom a picture, and I was like, gosh, that's so funny, because I saw it later, I was like, it does not look like that anymore. But when I see that picture, it reminds me. It's like that, oh yeah, it can look like that. And so if you do help your kiddo with organizing a closet or a space and taking a picture and just reminding them, you know, what it can look like and how good that feels, it just sets them up for success. So here's a game in the organization called Snake Oil. And then just a couple of notes on behavior. Just remember that behavior changes slowly. And, you know, active planned ignoring can be a huge tool. Focusing on the behaviors that you've identified and the kid knows you're both working on. Before punishment can be effective, you have to make sure that you are, you know, checking in with your kids, you're focused and giving positive feedback. When a behavior is followed by a positive consequence, so consequences, like we were saying, can be good, positive consequences, that it's more likely to occur again. They need opportunities to practice behaviors. So I know it seems like some things are like so simple, but they might not really be to that kid. And then anticipating problem behaviors can also be really helpful. So we talked about the time out. And then one more strategy that I think is really cool, I know everybody's home has a different feeling, but someone I worked with had kind of a combined family where she had kids and she married someone with kids, so they had 5 kids together. And she said, it can be wonderful, but it can also be really hard. So she had implemented this practice called special time. And so they had every night of the week, a kid had special time just with her, whether it was as mom or stepmom or whatever, and it was about 20 to 30 minutes. They could do anything the kid wanted. If the kid wanted to watch a show together, if they wanted to craft together, if they wanted to just go on a walk or whatever, but the kid got to pick the activity. I think that, you know, giving kids that intentional time. I know with the phone, it's so hard for me. Sometimes I don't want to be on my phone. Sometimes I'll just leave it in the other room. I'll turn my ringer off and just say, I'm not going to go look at my phone, because if I have it there, I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to add to a grocery list when I think of something, or I'm going to say, oh, I just want to write this one person. And then I'll catch myself, my poor kid sitting here trying to, you know, interact with me. And I'm like, and I'm like, stop. I mean, there's times you have to do that, but, you know, trying to say this time today, even if it's 20 minutes, is going to be really, you know, connected, special time together. So, and then this was some advice I saw on just giving them feedback, specific feedback. So I had another video, but I'm sure a lot of you are ready to get home and start your night. I will share this with you so you can have access to some of the articles and things. And then this was just a sample of a homework contract. It's pretty intense. So I'm not, you know, once again, you could modify it to have your own little contract, but it kind of gives some parameters to your expectations and which are your responsibility and the kiddos, that kind of thing. And we had a couple. Miss Donna, should we have people draw numbers or draw numbers? We had those little. Yeah. How do we?
Do you have enough books for everybody that
Cool.
came tonight?
Cool.
What your ADHD child wishes you knew. So, yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
And then we're going to draw for some door prizes. Thanks for joining us.
So I guess we'll just have them
Yeah, I'll draw some for. Yeah, just
put their name
put
and
their
then.
names. Yeah, put their names.
Making this so hard. I'm like, it's the end of the day, you guys. Sorry. And then I'm going to leave these note cards. And so this would be great if you have something that you were really hoping got addressed tonight and it didn't, or if you'd ever like to talk one-on-one or have me connect you with someone that has more on a topic, please just leave these tonight. I know a lot of you probably haven't had, well, I guess maybe dinner, but yeah, and then we'll draw for the door. You're like, what are we doing these here? It's let's see here.
Real quick, I also wanted to show you what Scott and Asher and Enrique did. So they made a stick of pine ball. All it is rice and what do you got? buttons, we have beads, we have gems. They picked out all of them themselves. Well, what I found interesting is we had beads that had letters on them. So they both took gracious time and came up with every letter in their name. So they know what's in here. I mean, they went through the tedious task of finding each letter for their name. So Enrique knows what is in here, right? Every letter of your name, the color of beads. He even picked out a seashell. So this is another thing that can help them just kind of help focus. It worked really well. Really cheap thing to do. You can get these bottles anywhere. You can get little knickknacks. There's even a paper clip in here. So really anything you have around the house they could do. We did super glue it, or not super glue it. We hot glue gunned it. Because even though it is just, harmless stuff, it's just, we don't want to have to clean up that mess.
Yeah.
Especially if they get around and doing all this. So we just hot glued the top as we put it on. Did you enjoy doing that activity? All right, so see, he can see, he can find, he already looked for his letter E. That's the beginning of his first name, and so he was able to locate it and so forth. So those are little simple things that you can do that will help with focusing. And actually, if you they're kind of having an issue, you can have them angle it up at an above eye level range. And when a child and an adult looks up or glares up, it does cut off that emotion. So it helps you calm down. I do this a lot in the school as they're walking down the hallway. For whatever reason, crying or upset, I have them walk as they're looking up. Not like the whole head, but just looking up. And sure enough, those tears will stop. They may come back, but temporarily they do calm down. And it's an effective way for me myself when I'm upset too. And I'll keep that in mind. But I wasn't able to listen to to Miss Kiser, but what I did hear, it seemed like it was very informative. I think I welcome you. I'm glad you all showed up, took the time out tonight to learn about ADHD and maybe some tips that can help you. I think that we had enough.
We had enough books for everybody.
Books to go around, and I think now I assume we already did question and answer and all that kind of
We
stuff.
didn't do any Q&A, but I told them to leave questions on their note cards, and I can stay. I just didn't want to make them feel like
about ready to wrap up, and I don't want you to leave without door prizes.
Leave your emails on your cards too if you want a copy of the keynote, and I can send that.
Yes, please.
So we have there's just 4, so of course there's 5 of you. We could have gotten 5 if I had.
Well, I think I have something else in my office. So.
Okay, this is just a little. This is a calendar, and then some of the games that we had mentioned on.
One of your children said they really wanted Jenga, so I hope it's the one.
I hope it's the right.
Maybe you can trade with somebody if it's not. Let's see.
An oldie but a goodie, right? I know, it's like, it's,
I'll just take a little calendar. Chelsea?
I don't need anything. I have all the games. We have everything.
good. That's awesome.
Yes, he has.
Okay.
He has 2 different items.
Oh, that's why he likes it, because you play them, right? That's why.
Yeah, you can give it to somebody. No, we have Monopoly Jenga and we have regular Jenga. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know about Monopoly Jenga.
Yeah, it's painted, and I forgot how to play it. We did it like once, but it's got like different things on.
Fun. I've seen people put like sight words and stuff on it, but anyways. Well, we have the best FRCs in the world. They're amazing. So thank you for organizing and inviting me. And just the fact that you guys are here, you know that you're amazing. To give up your personal time and do this shows how much that you care. And I'm sure you all could teach, knowing the amount of research you all have probably done, you could probably teach your own class. So, and the best PD is really not just one person talking at you, but having more of a chance to to talk. Is there any good like support groups or anything in E-Town? I'm not from this area as far as ADHD or.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
For sure either.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have, you know.
I think Communicare used to have some support systems for a variety of needs and diagnoses.
Yeah.
I maybe just call the local comp, which is Communicare here in Hardin County, and just see if they have anything. And they might. I just don't know.
And I was just gonna say, yeah.
There you go.
Start your support group. That you probably could reach out to another parent that's probably could benefit from having another parent to talk to. I think you could start your own group. Meet for coffee somewhere.
I know.
Yeah.
You don't always want to just go to a presentation or a. It's just really just having someone that gets you and what you're, experiencing. And it is such a broad topic, though. You can each have a kid with ADHD, and they're totally different kid. There's no two. Yeah.
Y'all have any questions for Ms. Kiser? What question?
Okay. Well, congratulations on your door prize winner.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. It's nice to have y'all.